Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 203. Who is running the country? Because it's definitely not Joe Biden. I mean, he's so senile and suffering from dementia or whatever senior citizen illness that he has. He's definitely not running the country. I mean, he barely even appears at important state level meetings, G7, foreign leaders of foreign countries. Yeah, he's definitely not giving any orders. And it's kind of crazy. One might even ask who's running Joe Biden, right? It's not who's running the country, Joe Biden. No, it's who's running Joe Biden. And it's kind of interesting because he's really kind of a puppet, I mean, in the literal sense. And it might be his wife who's running him. I don't know. I saw a picture. Babylon Bee was poking fun at it that Jill Biden was the first female president of the United States. And there were rumors going all over the place that it was her who was pushing Joe to run again, to run 4 years ago because she saw that she was going to be able to benefit tremendously. There are all these other rumors about how she is having an affair and just, basically living large. Who knows? I don't know. But his wife, Jill Biden, appeared at the cabinet meeting sitting where Joe should be sitting. And so that's where you get that humorous first female president of the United States bit. And we know that while Babylon Bee is parody, a lot of the things that they joke around about, turns out to be pretty much the truth, right? What's actually going on. And so it's this weird thing where they're making jokes, but they're more a source of potential real news than actual news sources. 1,900 men of the 101st Airborne Division. So it's the Airborne Brigade that it was sent to the Middle East yesterday. Who made that call? Uh, who gave the green light for the Kursk offensive that the Ukraine launched into Russia? Who gave the green light to Israel to bomb Lebanon? And what's so crazy is that when I heard the news about all of these attacks into Lebanon, uh, one of the last semesters I taught at the university, I had students from Lebanon, and we had really interesting discussions. They were suffering from inflation, and especially since I was talking about inflation so much in class, they would ask about inflation in their own country, and it made a lot of sense. They were able to communicate some of the things we discussed in class to their relatives at home. I'm sure they knew, but for her, it was able to, she was able to get her head around a lot of the things that were going on in her hometown. And it's really sad for me to hear that, I don't know where she lived, but potentially her family is getting bombed by the weapons supplied by the United States. And that kind of thing, because you see that personal aspect where you put a face to some of the people who are being bombed, that you realize that this is all something else. It's not what people are saying it is. And just to hear the news saying, oh, Israel is retaliating against missile attacks, they're going after this terrorist organization, Hezbollah. Well, okay, but again, do you consider any of the people on the ground and why these organizations even exist in the first place? And then you got to ask who gave the green light to take out Trump. And if you listen to Judge Napolitano's podcast episode with Larry Johnson, he raised the possibility that the communications network of the Secret Service has been compromised. So maybe there wasn't a leak in that sense, but someone was able to intercept communications, which is how someone knew that Trump was going to be at that particular golf course that day. But it doesn't explain why some of the more obvious locations where there would be a shooter wasn't, examined. There wasn't a person stationed there where normally there is. So, who would benefit from that? I don't know, the U.S. Secret Service, because they get a bigger budget. And I talked about that not that long ago. Being pro Kamala, being pro Harris now is being pro war, right? Because they're not trying to kill her. I mean, people are trying to unalive Trump, but they're not trying to unalive her. And so one might wonder, maybe it's the military industrial complex, right? So aside from the fact that she's constantly promising to do things if she gets elected, even though she's already in office now, and the fact that more people don't point this out or even try to hide it or even tell her not to stop saying it is amusing. The fact that people will even believe some of the things that she's saying is just sort of dystopia on a level I could never imagine, right? Like I would watch some of these dystopian movies where the government would just patently lie to everybody. And I would say that could never happen. I mean, people aren't that dumb that they would believe these stupid lies. I mean, they're not even good lies. They're just really bad lies. And yet I'm watching, people all around me are believing all of these lies. I mean, particularly the often repeated lies that was spoken by Harris at that last travesty of a debate where no one fact checked her, even though many of the things that she said were debunked by everybody. But now all of a sudden they're true again. It boggles the mind, really. So no one is trying to get rid of her, but yet people are trying to get rid of the other person, the other candidate, Trump, right? Now the thing is, Trump is not really that impressive, right? I mean, he's talking about tariffs, he's talking about increasing spending, he's not talking about cutting anything. What is it, Ron Paul? He said, I'm pretty sure it was Ron Paul. He said that the reason why they don't discuss any issue of substance is because that would mean you'd have to start cutting the budget. But because the big ticket items on the budget are untouchable, otherwise you just simply won't even be considered for election, because you can't talk about the big ticket items like Social Security, military, because you can't talk about that. You have to talk about other things, right? You have to talk about minor issues. And that's what's kind of interesting. But Trump is talking about at least ending the Ukraine war. And I have a suspicion that he would sort of walk back a lot of the aggression that's going on with Israel. I mean, if once he sees that, hey, Russia is being, poked through Ukraine, okay, well, we're not going to do that. Well, that's what's kind of happening in Israel as well. And so something tells me that he can't say outright that he would try to end that uh, aggression as well. And so he's going to take a sort of a roundabout route to cease the aggression there. On a similar note, then, you see also hitting the headlines Dr. J. Varma, a really heinous individual. He was the Corona czar of New York City. Basically, he pronounced all of the lockdown measures, really went after people, declared policies to make people's lives really miserable. Well, clearly he's working for Big Pharma. After his tenure as the Cervasis czar in New York City, he got a job teaching gig with some university. I think might have been an Ivy League school. And then after that, probably because he can't really teach, he was given a job at a pharmaceutical company. But ever since Steven Crowder had that expose, he lost that job, and now he is going to be examined closely. But of course, nothing's going to happen to him. He's probably connected. And for him to take a hit means that a lot of the pharmaceutical industry, the policies, and many other people might be implicated. And so they're going to just bury it, brush it under the rug, sweep it under the rug kind of thing. But if you haven't heard, Dr. J. Pharma, who was the Corona czar of New York City, uh, he was out on a date with a woman who probably he wanted to get busy with. And because he, wanted that, he let his mouth run, sort of bragging how awesome he was and talked about all the wild times he had. At the same time, he was preventing people from coming out of their houses. And so he was having a grand old time, drug-fueled parties, engaging in a lot of adult behavior, which would make a lot of people blush. But nevertheless, he was proud of it. Was not ashamed at all. He had no regret about all of the many lives that he destroyed. He didn't care, so he was just extremely uncareful. Arrogance does that to you. And he lays it all out. And then, Steven Crowder shows up and says, so, and instantly he realized that he made a mistake. But I think that it's not the first time that he ran his mouth. I think he ran his mouth to lots of people. It's just that finally someone who was unsympathetic to that whole phenomena got him, right? So you'd have big pharma, right? And then you got Fauci, right? And if Fauci came up today because in my middle school, people started asking me, oh, because one of the kids had gotten cervasis and it was bad for him, right? And so but he had basically stayed away from everybody for 3 years. And so 3 or 4 years. And so now that he's sort of trying to get back into society, uh, rubbing elbows with other people, he got sick. So it was sort of this delayed exposure, and apparently it knocked him out. At least that's what I'm hearing. And so he's coming back, and so I guess we started talking about the cervasis. And so someone asked me where it was from, and I was like, obviously, it was from China, right? Funded by U.S. taxpayer money, money that was sent over there, approved by Fauci. But because I think it was during the Obama administration, it came out that we were doing this gain of function research. So they offshored it, just like we offshored all the torture in America. And so labs went to China and many other labs went to the Ukraine. I don't know if you remember when Russia first invaded the Ukraine, they discovered labs, at least 6 of them. I don't know if there were more, but in the areas that they had actually taken over, they found 6 of these labs of where they're, experimenting with gain of function, which is absolutely insane. But anyway, so that is the NIH, the National Institute of Health, I believe that's what it's called. And so you have that special interest trying to, figure out how to get more money, how to do all of these things. Then you have immigration problems today. And so one might imagine another group, another special interest group that are looking for more power by ushering in all of this chaos, by disrupting these small communities, by dumping thousands of, illegal immigrants into their town all at once. So why am I, and that's just a small sample of some of the things that we're seeing in the news today. And so I guess in answer to the question, who's running the country? Well, there are a lot of people, a lot of different special interest groups that are fighting each other to try to get a piece of the pie. And my worry is that they can make it so bad that they'll cancel elections just like they did in the Ukraine, right? Oh, it's just so bad, it's too important now. We can't have elections. But if you take a step back and you realize that now it's just all these different special interest groups fighting each other, to get a piece of the pie, to get some money, to steal some money from the people of the United States. It's not very creative. It's not very original. It's not really hard to understand or even follow the money. It's not that difficult. The complexity comes from there being so many different special interest groups fighting each other. And so if you try to create a cohesive narrative, you just can't, it doesn't make any sense. But once you isolate each sort of special interest, each bureaucracy, if you will, then it begins to make sense that they're all sort of fighting each other, each for their own little piece of the pie, right? So there's no single entity in charge. The reality is that, even the uh, appearance of someone being in charge is no longer there. And so now kleptocracy on a massive scale is more obvious. It's easier to see. And kleptocracy is basically the government of theft, right? So you elect someone into power and that person steals for you, right? And it's out of control right now. And it's out of control and on such a scale because the dollar was the reserve currency of the world for a long time. And it's coming to an end. And this is what's really scary. This is what's so uncertain for a lot of people. What happens when a lot of people figure out that the dollar is essentially worthless or losing its value at an extremely quick rate? A lot of people have said that hyperinflation will take off once people lose confidence in the dollar. Well, many other countries, particularly the BRICS nations, they've already figured it out. And so for years, they've been accumulating gold, right? Because they're trying to extricate themselves slowly, right? To try not to create a panic uh, while solidifying their own economic positions and detaching themselves from the US and the West, right? And so if you look at recent history in terms of, the financial aspect of it, then a lot of it begins to make sense. And so clearly the financial district has its uh, desires and has its own agenda. And I think it's sort of driving and fueling much of what we see today, as I said, and the Fed, right? And now that we see that more and more people are figuring it out, gold price is even higher. I mentioned something about the gold prices yesterday, and I thought there might be a pullback, but no, it went up another, what, $30 now? It's at 26.56. It closed today at 26.56. And if you look at I don't know, websites where you can purchase a little bit, it's saying 26.67, which is much higher, and the futures price is even higher. So I don't know, maybe it's a thing that a lot of websites are doing now that buy and sell it, that it's sort of a compromise between the futures price and the spot price. I don't know. I don't know why that is. And Vince Lancy, who does morning episode for Arcadia Economics, he mentioned that it, the price continually going up when typically in September people usually dump gold. It might be because Americans are finally getting in on the action. Basically, that over the last few, uh, at least 10 years, foreign countries, foreign banks have been trying to stockpile gold. And now just the entities in America are figuring it out. And so now they're trying to buy it, which is why the price is spiking in the way that it is. Monaco 64, who releases a video every day. He talked about how England is really desperate to even get a little gold, so they're not even buying it, right? Because their economy is such a mess. They're trying to convince other countries to let them hold it for them. And so Argentina being the example, them sending over 60 tons of gold, which apparently is not that much considering China has possibly 25,000, 25. Yeah, 25,000 tons. So 60 tons and compare it to 25,000, it's completely different. And there are all those sayings that he who holds the gold, writes the laws or is in control of, the economy of the world. So BRICS countries, prior to their summit meeting, which I think is happening in October sometime, one of the things that they require all of their members is to have a certain amount of gold. And so all of those countries, and it turns out Saudi Arabia has been purchasing gold secretly in Switzerland, that came out recently. So all of this means either war on a grand scale, right? Russia, China, and the United States, right? Because the United States is trying to disrupt all of that. And so they're really pushing hard for war, but not nuclear war, right? But a conventional war. They're trying very hard for it, but they don't want to be the ones to start it. So they just keep poking people to try to attack them first, in which case I guess the United States can try to retaliate in some way. But it seems like it's kind of a race, right? Are we going to have the war first, or are we going to have economic collapse first? Well, economic collapse, a lot of people are saying well, it's going to take a couple years. Well, then maybe we'll have the war first, and then the economic collapse will come even quicker. Whatever, but what happens after, right? What happens if there's a huge war? What happens if there's an economic collapse? What's going to happen then? And I have no idea, right? God help us, really. So all of these things are going on, and it's going on in such a crazy way because no one is running the country. I don't think anyone has been running the country for years, for decades, but it's pretty obvious now. And the kleptocracy will probably get a lot worse before it gets any better. And even if we did have a Javier Milei type guy just totally gut the government, I don't think that things are going to get better anytime soon. So I want to have a positive ending. Maybe if enough people wake up and figure it out, that when things do go sideways, if there's a war, enough people will say no, as they did at the end of Vietnam. Or if there's a collapse, then people will remember that cooperation is the way to go, instead of violence and thieving and all this other kind of stuff, the Mad Max scenario. I do have hope. I do have hope that the people who deserve judgment, punishment, horrible things done to them will have it done to them. And then the rest of us can figure out how to live in peace and restore prosperity for even more people. That's my hope anyway. So I will talk to you next time.